All right, what's up, everyone? Shiras only here, back here to give you guys another good ass tutorial for free. You know how I do. Um, Today's topic's gonna be a much requested topic, and it's gonna be on compressors, right? I'm gonna give you guys an in-depth tutorial on compressors, so that the next time you guys use compressors, you know what the heck is going on and you know what to do and all that good stuff, okay? Because many people, when they begin producing, they don't exactly know what a compressor does. It's not a effect that you could hear on your ear like right away, like reverb or delay or distortion, but it's a type of plugin that you need certain kind of ears to get trained for. So it takes some time to get used to. So I'm gonna start, and obviously I cannot cover the whole scope of compressors here because compressors are so extensive. So let's look at my track. I got my track right here. Right here, I just made it so that it solos the drums right now. Alright, and I'm gonna show you guys what compressors do. Okay, so first of all, I got my Fruity limiter. Alright, let me check my Fruity limiter. So this the most basic compressor plugin for Fruity. And compressor does two things, okay? Compressor, first of all, was, I guess, in the first place, used for volume control. Back in the days, they didn't have a compressor, whether that's a hardware compressor or a software compressor. And what people would do is with the volume fader, they would have to control it, at certain points to tame the sound or to make a sound louder. And basically, obviously, there's limitations to that because, yeah, humans can respond only so fast to sound that's passing by, right? So compressors were made, and obviously compressors could react instantaneously and more accurately to sudden leaps in sounds and tame the sounds. So that's why they were made. Another reason to use for compressors besides volume control is for making the sound denser. And because compressors squeeze the shit out of your sounds, depending on how you use it, it makes the sound more dense. And what I mean by dense is this is a hard concept to grasp, but you guys will hear a lot of things about dynamic range versus loudness when you guys are trying to use a compressor or a multi-band compressor or trying to master. Dynamic range means, if you look at this vocal sample right here, dynamic range means basically difference between the topmost parts in the sample and the lowest parts, okay? The difference, so that because human ears hear a sound in a way that we find it to be more dynamic. Dynamic here doesn't mean loud, okay? We find the sound to be more dynamic if it has loud parts and then soft part. A good example of this will be maybe a drop followed by a silence. The drop sounds louder because it's followed by a silence, right? So that will be dynamic range versus loudness. Loudness is just these waveforms just being loud all the time. That's loudness. And the human ear has a perception where because it compares the sound to what it is, the relative sound to what we're hearing at the moment. So if the music itself is very loud and then you have a loud part it doesn't sound as loud as, like I said before, if it's followed by silence and then you have boom, a drop or impact. It sounds way louder like that because our ears are accustomed to the sound that we're hearing. I hope you guys understand what I said. If not, ask me questions later. Okay? So those are what it is. So let's go over some of the common controls here. And besides, you guys could look at this. Okay? Stop the screen, look at it. So first of all, we got our threshold. So if you guys look at my waveform right here, the hardest thing that's hitting right now is the kick. The kick is the one that's coming up here. So let's say, for example, I just want to tame the kick, okay? The rest of it is the snares and the hi-hats. Then I would lower the threshold to the point where I just get the kick, and then here the ratio is, you know, the more that it goes down, it squeezes it harder, along with the knee. The knee is, it basically makes a curve, or it makes a, yeah, you guys. So we talk about knee in terms of harder. This will be a harder knee, which will be more jagged, and then this is a softer knee with a curve. Okay, it's used along with the ratio. So if I put my settings like this, then I could just tame the kick. Versus if I put it all down, then I affect all the sound. Capiche? Alright, and then we got these attack and release knobs here. These are the common controls in whatever kind of compressors. Attack and release basically means this is how fast, so if you guys look up on the left screen, this is how fast the compressor is going to act to lower the volume on the sound wave. Okay, so if this is obviously longer, then it takes a longer time to react. You guys see how it's not squishing, and then it's working instantaneously now because it's shorter. Releases after it squishes, like how long does it take to come back to the original? So obviously if this is long, then it will never come up. You see how it takes longer to come up. On Fruity compressor, on this Fruity limiter compressor, whatever you want to call it, they have this ahead, and don't get mixed up, this is not a look ahead function. This is basically in an ADSR envelope, this is a sustain function, which means you have the attack, you have the sustain, and then you have the release. So this is how long it sustains that compression for. You see how this is just squishing it forever? Yeah. Okay, and then you have this curve right here on the, also that's unique to this Fruity limiter, that compresses how do I explain it? Just look at help. Picture paints 1,000 words. So these are the compressor settings. Okay, so from 1 is very sharp, and the 8 is it has a longer release. All right, so you use accordingly. All right, the next one is, if you look at other compressors, not this one, they normally have a peak or RMS setting. Okay, peak or RMS, and this goes back to my whole talk about dynamic range versus loudness, overall loudness. Peak is basically dynamic range, And what I mean by this is the compressor senses the topmost parts, the loudest parts, you know, in the waveform, and then tends to compress those accordingly. Versus RMS, which stands for root mean square, and I don't exactly know the formula behind it, but RMS basically compresses in an overall way, much like our ears would hear. So that means it averages out the lowest parts and the highest parts of a song, and yeah. And to show you guys this, if I open up Maximus right here, if you guys go over here, there's a peak and RMS settings. So listen to the difference. This is just the hi-hats. I soloed it. You guys hear how when I put it on the RMS, it got suddenly a lot louder, right? And this is because here I used it as a gate, so I'm expanding it versus opposite of compression. So on the RMS part, it averages out and it brings the whole level up versus just raising up the levels of the peak. I hope you guys understand what I'm saying. I'm not anyways, ask me any questions later. Okay, so that's peak versus RMS. That's another common function. Stereo link, this is another common function in a lot of compressors. Open up Ozone right now. Stereo link basically means you get to either compress left and right channels separately, or mid and side channels separately. And sometimes you want to do this because, for example, panning. Okay, when you pan a certain instrument to the left or to the right, you know, you have some hi-hats to the left, for example, you know, then you only want to control the left, you know, the left compressor, instead of doing the whole thing and bringing the whole level down. So that's why you have stereo link or left and right compressors. Same for mid and side. Sometimes the mid channel has the most energy, so you would just want to tame the mid levels, as right here. You know, you have the stereo and then you use a different compression setting for mid and side. So you have more control over the mid and the sides. So that's how that works out. Okay, what's the next one? Makeup gain. Makeup gain. All right, makeup gain. If you look back here, fruity limiter. Most compressors tend to have makeup gain attached, and you know, it's the gain that you put up afterwards to make it louder. Yeah, to put up the sound, you know, because it squashes the sound, so you want to bring it up to a certain level back again. You know how it is. Okay, that's the point of the makeup gain. Some compressors have a built-in makeup gain along with the threshold, like Ozone, just what I opened right now. So for Ozone, you know, if I go to the limiter right here, maximize or whatever they want to call it, if I bring down this threshold, the volume automatically goes up. So it's dialing up the makeup gain automatically as I lower the threshold. Okay. Look ahead. All right, the look ahead is another common function, and look ahead is basically, back in the days of hardware compressors, they didn't have enough hardware. It does it in real time, right? Versus in the digital realm, you know, waveforms can be analyzed before. So in the days of hardware compressor, sometimes a waveform might pass. Let's say, for example, this part passes, and then the attack wouldn't have enough time to react to it before it passes. So to counter that, what they did is they made a look ahead function. And look ahead function is, it does exactly what it sounds like. Okay, and the look ahead function basically works by, they take the waveform. Let's say, for example, they take the waveform, and then look ahead a lot of times has settings up to maybe 20 milliseconds or so, and it looks ahead. And the way it looks ahead is, it takes a separate signal and it reads this first, reads the earlier signal first. So earlier signal first, and then according to what they read here, they'll compress here accordingly. I hope that makes sense, because a compressor is not a prophet. It's not a sightseer. I don't know how to call it. So it can't actually look ahead in real time. So what they do is they take the waveform and then they put an earlier version of it and they look at it and do it accordingly, you know. And look ahead is used a lot for certain bass or lower frequencies that tend to escape better, you know, get out of the way better. And it's a compromise between how do I say it? Between a slow attack setting, which would have a more gradual effect on your waveform, versus a sharper attack setting. Okay, because obviously if you have it set it right here and then you have the fastest attack setting, then the attack or the compression is going to sound very fast and it might pump. So you're going to go back here, and then apply a slow attack, so that by the time this comes around, you know, the compression is already on the way. So it's a balance, you know. That's the look ahead function. Okay. I'm not gonna cover individual ratios, like how to do vocals or how to do guitars here, because you guys could just Google them and a lot of stuff comes up. Just know that it depends on the genre, what kind of ratio you use, what kind of threshold you use. Okay. As a general rule though, read this. Okay, I'm just gonna read this right here. You can compress any instruments or samples with lower frequencies harder, so which means higher ratios, harder knees, because lower frequencies, first of all, it doesn't sound as compressed as higher frequencies when you compress them, and the dynamic range fluctuates more, you know, than higher frequencies. So in lower frequencies, you know, you need more decibels, you need more volume to hear the same thing at higher frequencies. Remember, I told you guys this before. This is why the hi-hats have to always be lower in volume than the sub bass or whatever, or the 808s. Okay, so the lower part is it has more decibels, you know. So it fluctuates more, so you have to tame it more using more compression and harder compression, versus higher frequencies need less compression. Okay, so any instruments, any samples, any kind of music that has higher frequencies, you're gonna be using less compression. Okay, and yeah, because on higher frequencies, like here, the compression is easily heard and the dynamic range doesn't fluctuate as much in higher frequencies. Okay, on higher frequencies, if you guys compress it, you could hear it immediately, pretty much. And then the second rule that you guys have to follow is, on genres that are more live or organic, you know, like jazz or classical music or opera or something like that, you're going to be using as small as you can compression as possible, as least, you know. the smallest you can, because those organic genres, they sound very weird if you squash them, you know. And obviously on harder genres like EDM or more electronic genres like EDM or rock or something that has a lot of bass energy, you're going to have to use more compression, and it sounds much more natural to use more compression to level it out, you know. Organic genres has more dynamic range. Classical music has a lot of dynamic range. So you don't want to get rid of that dynamic range. You're going to want to keep the dynamic range. And so you're not going to compress it to bring up the overall loudness. Okay? You're going to try to use less compression as possible. And so I hope you guys understood everything. I know I covered a lot in a short amount of time. But this, if you guys really do understand what I say here, you guys should have no problem whatsoever using any kind of compression plugin or compression. Because in the end, the theory is the same. Okay, the compressors are only different because they use different curves and different filters or different sound qualities. That's the only difference. The knobs and the functions are the same. So ask me if you guys have any questions. Follow me on SoundCloud or Facebook. I need some followers on Facebook, all right? Because I don't have any. And have a great day, okay?